Know what to do with it then.
Right. Well, welcome everybody to this, our final session of this academic year for the Bookselling Research Network. We are thrilled to have Lanora Jennings join us. She's going to talk to us about the Bookseller oral history, which she's been setting up. So welcome, Lanora. And before we hand over to you, just a short bit of information. You have such a great background, Lanora. So Lanora is not only a Princeton University Press and Yale University Press sales rep, overseeing the Midwestern United States, but she's also a veteran bookseller who got her start unpacking boxes in her grandmother's bookstore, which I hope we're going to hear more about in this afternoon session. She later worked at Borders, Politics and Prose, and Harry W. Schwartz bookstores in Milwaukee. Jennings is currently writing a history of independent bookstores in America and is director of the Bookseller Oral History Project, which has begun collecting interviews with current and former booksellers about their historical experiences, insights, and perspectives. And this will eventually become part of a new archive on the history of bookselling at the University of Iowa Libraries Special Collections and Archive. So it's clear that Lanora can fit a lot into a very busy life. So over to you, Lanora. We can't wait to hear more about the project and yeah, any findings that you've discovered so far on the journey. So over to you.
Well, we can actually thank this a group of people for the idea for this project, because when I was with all of you last year in Reading, there was a lot of talk about how difficult it was to find primary sources for, bookstores, booksellers. It's really not like a bookstore thinks, oh, I'm going to donate my papers to an archive. And I thought it would be important to start collecting these stories now, and why not let the booksellers speak for themselves? And I had the idea, but I didn't really do anything about it. And I don't know if you saw that it's kind of a strange happenstance. I had asked the ABA, if I could, the American Booksellers Association, if I could come do some research in their archives. And I had asked Allison, the director, last fall. And she kind of said, well, about that, normally we would welcome you, but our lease is up in February and we're not renewing it. We're going to all work remote and we don't know what to do with the archive. I reached out on Sharp and I got connected with the folks at Columbia in New York and sort of played matchmaker between them and the ABA. Went there, helped them organize the archive and get it to Columbia, which I'm very excited about, because I got to see a lot of it. It was over 100 years of books selling history in America, and it was phenomenal what is in that collection. And I think everybody will be very interested once they can make it available to the public. So then Allison, as a thank you, offered to pay for and set up a booth for me at the Winter Institute, which is this huge gathering of booksellers in America annually. And that is where we decided to launch the Oral History Project. So it was great. I had the equipment, I had a booth, I had a way to have 500 more booksellers in one place to corral into the booth. And so that was amazing. The response from booksellers was just overwhelming for me in a way. Like I said, this is something I've been doing on my own in my spare time. It is not, I don't have any volunteers, which I would love to have, but uh, the fact that booksellers were so eager to share their stories and sign up, the booth was pretty full the entire time. And I did find it interesting. They were kind of shy because nobody wanted to just talk on their own. So the format has ended up being interviews. And some of the interviews are more formal, some are really less formal, depending on the bookseller and what they want to talk about. I did have a list of prompts written out and handed out to them that they could, as a launching point to give them ideas on what to talk about. And some of those questions were like, how and when did you become a bookseller? What drew you to bookselling? Have you had any mentors? What did you learn from them about bookselling? What is your philosophy of bookselling? And then even just practical stuff like, where did you work? What did you do? And one of the most profound questions we asked almost everybody was, why are bookstores important? Why do we need them? Uh, mm, excuse me, I'm very thirsty. So it depended on the person. You know, I interviewed people from very, very young to pretty old. The youngest bookseller was 15. And you know, I've been interviewing people in their 70s who have long retired. It's been very, very profound, actually, to hear their stories. It was my impression that many of them have never been asked and were eager to tell their own story, especially having been through COVID. That was brought up a lot. It was a very traumatic time for booksellers, and a lot of them really needed to talk about it. So it was almost like, if you're familiar with the Charles Schulz cartoon where Lucy sets up her little booth, you know, it's like advice, 5 cents. Um, I felt like this was more like, you know, being a bibliopsychologist in a way, and just listening to people tell a lot of their stories. Some were funny, many were very, very profound. I have over 80 interviews so far. They are all between 30 and 90 minutes. And I have found, this is where the more intellectual part comes in. I found really what I think are 4 commonalities that are important areas that that we should study. So the first one is bookselling is a cultural expression. And by that, I mean, it's an identity. Booksellers don't say, I work in a bookstore. They say, I am a bookseller. And this identity derives from a very collegial and cooperative community of booksellers among, um, you know, retail businesses that would otherwise be considered competitors, right? So there are, and a part of this community, and I would argue a culture, these traditions and practices and values of bookselling, these beliefs are passed on down from one generation of booksellers to the next. The second is that bookselling is a political expression. So bookselling is a form of activism that uses that bookstore space to create a better world. The third theme that comes out is bookselling is also a moral expression. There is a shared sense of purpose and values, all based on, you know, a belief in the power of the book to change people, to make the world a better place, to save lives. Everybody phrases it a little bit differently, but at its core, it's really a moral value that they share on what bookselling means. And the last one is bookselling is community, which is the emphasis is on the social profit, not the financial. And you know, the bookstores measure their success by the impact on their local community, not by the P&L statement. And a lot of the stories just were so profound, but none of them talked about how many books they sold, you know, how much money they made. And a lot of the stories had nothing to do with selling books, which is also very interesting that you have this retail capitalist endeavor performing these very community-oriented social and cultural functions. And then there's one other commonality that's a minor one, but I thought it was also very interesting, was most of these booksellers had book scarcity as a child. One of the questions we asked was, what was the first book you read, or what was the first bookstore you ever experienced? You know, how did you come to love reading? And all of them really said that they started at the library and that their family couldn't afford many books and they didn't have easy access. And that sort of fostered a more of a craving for books than maybe somebody who grew up in a house full of books. So that was also interesting. So now I'm just going to play some clips because I really want the booksellers to speak for themselves. And I do have them by theme. So these first 4 clips are about bookselling as a cultural expression. And first, we are going to hear from Kaylin Landau. She is formerly of Tattered Cover Bookstore in Denver, Colorado, and currently works for Microcosm Publishing Press here, which is a wonderful little independent press. And here she is talking about Joyce Meskis, who was the founder of, who has since passed, but she was the founder of Tattered Cover, and also a very staunch First Amendment rights supporter. You know, she is famous for winning a Colorado Supreme Court case because she refused to hand over customer records of somebody who had been arrested for domestic terrorism. And so here's what she has to say.
The great Joyce Meskus had a very well-defined philosophy, and it permeated through the entire organization. A large part of that was spending time with Joyce, talking about her philosophy of bookselling, that books are for everyone. And the motto of the store at that time was connecting books and people. And the bottom line, that was what she was concerned about, and that anybody could get any book that they wanted at any time. We would do our best to get any book for any person without any editorializing or gatekeeping.
And then I'm going to play her again because I also think this is important. It talks about bookselling really as an identity. So this is a short one, but
the joy of someone coming back to you and saying, that book you recommended, I loved that book. What else you got for me? And while I haven't worked in a bookstore since 1995, I'm still a bookseller.
she's still a bookseller. And that is, I think, a very powerful statement. Next is, let's see, Muhammad Malik. He owns Malik Books in Los Angeles, California. And I will let him speak for himself about how he was influenced by another bookstore. Oh, let's get it playing where we have sound. Actually, I'll play Claudia while I troubleshoot that one. Claudia is the manager of Twig Bookstore in San Antonio, Texas, and she's talking about the community that booksellers have created amongst each other.
Booksellers are like teachers also. They're very resourceful. They do a lot with a little. They are creative people. Booksellers need each other to do well. And so I never think of us as competitors.
Yeah. Also, I think very telling, and that all goes to passing on a tradition, having bookselling as an identity. So let's see if we can get Malik talking here.
I'll tell you the bookstore that made an impact in my life, and that bookstore was named Esselwan. They're no longer around, but I know that in Los Angeles, they made a huge impact in our community, and it was going there that I purchased, I remember, $400 worth of books, because I was searching the knowledge that I didn't get when I got a degree.
I don't know why it's doing that. Hold on. Oh, my iTunes went off. Okay. I was listening to 80s new wave to get myself through the day. That was Malik. His bookstore is doing very well in Los Angeles. What I also found interesting was he told a story about how when he first opened his store, it wasn't doing very well. A year later, he moved. And a week later, the Rodney King riots broke out on his corner. And so here's a bookstore that also really witnessed and even participated in some very important historical events. That's just a side note. I'm going to let a couple speak on now bookselling as a political expression. The first one is Jean-Paul Garnier. He is the owner of Space Cowboy Bookstore in Joshua Tree, California.
Well, free flow of information is essential to democracy, would be the bottom line of that for me. Revolutions have literally begun in bookstores. It's a place for free flow and exchange of ideas where there isn't a judgment surrounding it. We need that for a healthy culture. It's an unfortunate thing, but I think it's no surprise as we see decline in book sales and reading. We also see negative turns in politics. There has to be places for people to be able to speak freely. And I think the majority of bookstores and booksellers are serious advocates for free speech. You can have any kind of conversation you want in my bookstore. And I've even had someone come in not that long ago and said, "Are conservatives allowed in here?" And I'm like, "Are you serious? Come in." You're a reader, you're welcome. It's a community space in that way. Come in and speak freely.
I'm gonna have Malik talk a little bit again. He was so dynamic and fun to talk to. So he also says that he is not just a bookseller, but a book activist.
Why I say I'm a book activist, because I know the inertia and the change that I've helped made that difference. And I didn't even know. I'm very grateful and thankful that I'm in this industry because it is making a change for the next generation. Why I say I'm a book.
Yeah. And so that's, that was important to him. He was talking very much about how he went to UC California and his education didn't tell him anything about, Black history, about, people, and he went searching for that. And now he wants to make sure the next generation has access to that information. Next, I have Gretchen Trow. She's the co-owner of A Room of One's Own bookstore in Madison, Wisconsin. If you're not familiar with this store, it is a very famous store. It started in the early 70s as one of the feminist bookstores, rise of feminist bookstores in the 70s. It has gone through many iterations, but they are the second owners. And she has done a phenomenal job. She took over just before COVID, and they've done a phenomenal job of flipping the store to be more of the times. And so she is non-binary. I keep saying they are non-binary. This has now become a very safe space around Madison and Wisconsin for all people. And she did this amazing thing too. So I'm going to have her tell you about it.
It was 2019. So it was basically our first anniversary was running Bookstores Against Borders, which is after Trump had been holding all these people indefinitely, especially kids, in detention centers with unsanitary and inhumane conditions at the border. We just put out this clarion call. We're like, maybe we'll make $10,000. It'd be awesome. And we'll donate it to a thing. And we made $1 million to donate to that. I don't remember what the exact number is. It was a nuts number. So it was just sort of the first taste of, oh, we can be a political store, right? And we can find ways to engage communities that are feeling really isolated and angry and ineffective, and to put people in touch with one another in ways that say hey, this is unacceptable, what's going on, and here's a place we can all kind of come together and help in this way. We're not going to be able to solve it all, but we can start. And just even starting can have really profound impacts on a community.
So that is, book selling as a political expression. Now I'm going to give you some quotes play some clips from what I would consider expressing book selling as a moral expression. And so first, I have, Rebecca Lieber-Gottberg. She's the co-owner of Rediscovered Books in Boise, Idaho.
And there was a woman in the bookstore who was standing there, and I said, hello, how can I help you today? And she looked at me and she goes, I don't know. I am here on vacation with my husband, and he had a heart attack and he is in the ICU unit at the hospital. And I came here because I didn't know where else to go. And at that moment, I'm like, you need two things. First of all, you need to sit down and have a glass of water, and I'm going to give you a hug because you need somebody to connect with you, right? And I said, you need to sit there. And I said, and the second thing you need to do is while you sit by him, you need something to read that is going to make you feel good, and something that you can read out loud to this person. You need something that's going to help you pass the time. And I gave them this particular book that I absolutely love, that I think just speaks to the importance of human compassion and kindness and understanding, and is simultaneously funny. And I gave that to that woman, and I had a phone call a number of weeks later that said, I don't know who my mother talked to while she was here. This went on with my dad. Just so happened I answered the phone, and I said, yes, that was me. Is your dad? Yes, my dad is on the mend. They sent him home. But I'm calling to tell you because whatever you said to my mother, the woman she was when she left that hospital room was totally different than the woman who she was when she came back.
Yeah, see, this is where you start getting the tears in your eyes, right?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I'm going to have Claudia again, Carla Marcio from the Twig Bookstore talk on this as well.
Wow. Do I have a personal philosophy? I'm sure I do. Have I ever articulated it? I don't think I have. I have a deep, abiding, passionate sense that there's hardly anything more important than opening worlds in yourself and others. Every time you read a book, there's like another part of you that that opens up, that becomes aware, that connects with the author, if not what the author is writing about. And to be able to share that with others.
So that is the moral foundation of what they're doing as a bookseller. Next, I interviewed Dick and Susanna Hermans. They own Oblong Books in Millerton, New York. I believe this is just Dick talking. He is the founder, and this store began in 1974. Oh, let's start here.
Practice connect.
Oh, maybe this is
Just
Susanna.
connecting people with books. I mean, really fundamentally, that's the joy.
And weirdly, I'm not a religious person, but there is a spiritual aspect to this in terms of the energy the community brings to the space, and what, you know, and we're hosting that, and maybe, you know, guardians of that.
Yeah, it broke up a little bit, but he talks about being guardians of that space, but that's not theirs. And last, this is Artika Tyner. She runs a nonprofit bookstore in Minneapolis called Planting People, Planting Justice.
Bookstores give life. They give life in meaningful ways. If I think about our community in Rondo and our community where our bookstore is located in Minneapolis, it was a fresh breath of life to say through the pages of books we can connect together. Through the pages of books we can build together. Through the pages of books we can learn together. So when I think about the role of a bookstore, it invites people to the breath of life. That's how I see it.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. And then I have some talking about what I would consider in that category of social profit, of talking about, you know, the impact of their stores on their community. And I have to set this one up a little bit. Aaron and Drew Pineda own a bookstore in Detroit called 27th Letter Books. And here he is talking about an event that they had honoring a community member who had passed, who was an artist and musician. And so they had a music event in which the community could come in, and they had rap battles. And so this is what he's referring to in this video. And notice it's an event that had nothing to do with books.
I was working the front.
Sorry, wrong one. Here, Aaron, there we go.
So in this competition, there was a series of battles, and these MCs are going one-on-one. And there was a very young person, couldn't have been like, you know, I would say like maybe like 18 or something like that. But as they started sharing their voice and started rapping, it was initially like, you could kind of tell, like even with like body language and stage presence or whatever, that they weren't like super confident. But when the environment, the people that were in the store started to show love, and, you know, you started to get that feedback, I could see the shift in that person where they got very, oh, wow, my voice matters. And when, as soon as that clicked, it not only matters, it's like, wow, I'm powerful. They just like took over. That was just very meaningful for me. And then seeing it after they ended up winning, and just the joy that they had was very touching to me. When somebody, especially, you know, what can happen when we empower young people to share their voices, to share their stories, and say like, your story matters, your voice matters.
Yeah, so again, lots of powerful stories. I'm going to have Julie Wernersbach talk again, because I'm sorry, maybe she didn't talk yet. Julie Wernersbach is owner of Hive Mind Books. This is what we've been calling a novel model bookstore, which doesn't have a bricks and mortar location, but she has a traveling bookstore that goes to events and holds author events and, you know, pop-ups around New York and New Jersey.
I think now, as I'm a little bit older, I really am asking, like, what else is the bookstore doing? Especially since, you know, the way that the industry has changed so much. Like, we're not selling books, like we are, but we're also just selling the experience of the space and the experience of identifying with the bookstore as a customer. I think like that's such a big part of our business, and that's about so much more than the books that are getting sold. And so now, as I'm launching my own operation now for the first time, I'm really asking myself, what is our mission and what is our purpose? So I would say probably just a lot more mission driven than I think I was in my, I'm still really happy to sell a ton of books, but for me, it's much more about like, what's our impact beyond that?
Okay, this is Janet Seagrass again, telling I think a really profound story of a customer in her store. And what I thought was profound about it was the fact that this was a transaction where she made zero profit.
I was working the front desk, and it's a little bit different crowd up there. We get a lot of street people in. This young skinny man came in with holding his skateboard, you know, missing teeth, and hadn't probably showered in a long time. And he just comes through the front door and just comes right up to the front desk. Some people kind of stepped back and kind of gave him space or whatever. And so I'm like, can I help you? And it turns out that he was looking for a book that he had checked out from the library multiple times, but he had to keep returning it. And he said, I would like to buy a copy, you know, and do you have a copy? And he's being all tough and everything. And I'm like, well, I'll see, you know. Turns out we did have a copy, and he got very excited. His eyes just lit up. You could tell he loved this book. And then he goes, no, wait a minute, how much is it? And then he pulls this change out of his pocket, and he had $12 total, you know, crumpled up once and everything. And the book was $14.95. And he goes, forget it, I can't do it. And he just, you know, started stomping. I go, no, wait a minute. It's actually, this book is 40% off today, which put it just at $11.95, you know, and it was just the most amazing thing. And so I got to take him up there and get him the book, and he was so excited. His face just lit up. So that was joyful.
People before profit. And lastly, I have a small clip, but this I think is encapsulates the whole idea that the bookstore is a community and more owned by the community than the bookseller.
And then at my own store at Queen Anne Book Company, I'll never forget, there's this little girl that came in with her mom. She was about 3 every weekend. And she was just a little chatterbox. She was great, you know. And one Saturday I was working the desk, and she comes in and she flings the door open, and there's another little girl walking behind her, and she just throws her arms open and she goes, welcome to my bookstore, you know, and just pays no attention to anybody else. But, you know, she just stomps her little friend right back to the kids department. I thought, it is her bookstore.
Yeah, so that is what I have for you. As you can see, again, lots of powerful stories, lots of interesting stories, and I'm just thrilled that we are getting these down. I did have the privilege, and I haven't had time to work on the audio, of interviewing David, who started the Hungry Mind bookstore in Minneapolis, that is no longer here, but I'm sure you've all heard of it, which is a very influential left-leaning bookstore, and he was delightful. So I hope to get that out there soon. It turns out that he really inspired a lot of other bookstores around today. I mean, he's partially responsible for Prairie Lights existing in Iowa City because he advised Jim Harris on what to do to open a bookstore and more. So that's another, I'm finding a lot of connections. You know, you can almost in some ways draw what would be a family tree between a lot of these booksellers and a lot of these stores in the ways that they have influenced each other and connect with another. So I now can open this up to any questions.
Thank you, Lanora. Wow. I think we have, I certainly have loads of questions, but I'm not going to take Chair's privilege. So let's open it up to the rest of the group. Does anyone have a question for Lanora following up from that? Eleanor.
I just want to thank you for undertaking this wonderful project. It's really fascinating, and I hope you will continue to build on this too. And I like the divisions that you have, you know, the kind of categories you set up and the way you have matched up that. When you talk about a lot of these connections, are they more within a geographic community, or do they stretch cross country? And
Everywhere. Yeah, across the whole country. You know, a lot of these booksellers worked for other bookstores before they owned their own. And, you know, so I had talked to New York booksellers who started at Book People in Texas. You know, their mentors were Steve from Book People. So it's the connection is throughout the country.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering because I hadn't encountered this before till about, I guess, 2 years ago, and it's been going on before COVID, but book crawls where, you know, instead of a pub crawl, they visit bookstores for like a week. And these two young women had started one in DC. And that's when I started trying to find out more about these because it was an unusual concept. But they were talking about that they were working in a bookshop down on Capitol Hill. They had about 16 represented in Washington, DC. I have about 5 various kinds of bookstores within walking distance of me. I feel that I'm very spoiled, you know, here. But they said that the booksellers were hesitant at first. Some of them, not all of them, but they were like suspicious of what is going on. And they did a beautiful, I should scan it and post it because they did a beautiful brochure about this. And I was going to go on this and I got, not COVID, I got a terrible case of the flu. I really got sick and I was in bed for the whole week and I couldn't go to any. But anyway, we think about the relationship because you would think that there would have been closer local ties, you know, and there are, yeah. But I think that the inspirations probably came from elsewhere and modeled from the room, you know.
Yeah, well, there's an interesting history to that because that is basically how Independent Bookstore Day got started in about 10 years ago, 13 years ago in the United States. And so CALIBA, the California Independent Booksellers Association, decided to have a California Independent Bookstores Day, and they did this idea of like a passport or bookstore crawl. And so this is a great showing how this ideas get transmitted across the country. And so now, you know, it started there, it's spread, the ABA started sponsoring it, and now bookstores across the country and cities collaborate to do a variation of what you're talking about. So yeah, absolutely. It was started in one place and spread to everybody.
I also found them outside of the United States when I started. I think, Matthew, I didn't say, did you just put a link to something about it in the
Yeah, I mean, my timings, I'm only in the UK here and there. My timing is always so terrible. I've missed every single one, but I keep trying. So I think Sam probably is the one with the practical experience with them.
No,
but
I'm just amazed. I've never come across this before.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, yeah. Like, you know, it's London is. I mean, the URL has all the kind of various ones. But if you ever find yourself in the UK, they organize them all the time. Brighton, Bristol, several different towns.
Wow.
Bath, yeah.
We
Someday.
often have, I mean, you have to tell me on your end, but we often have people from your Booksellers Association attending Winter Institute and vice versa. So I know that there is a lot of communication and exchange about ideas between the two bookselling communities.
It does seem to be growing as well, Lanora, with that cross. I think the UKBA, and now we've got Rise, of course, which seems to be bringing together America and not just Europe. You know, booksellers do seem to be talking together across countries now, which is very exciting, I think. Just to see the commonalities that are arising, you know, the challenges are the same no matter which country you're in.
Right.
Sorry, that was not my question. Has anybody else got a question for Lanora before I go off on my whole long list? Matt, Maria, Caitlin, got anything you want to ask Lanora?
I think I know the answer to the question, which probably defeats the purpose of asking it, but I have to assume your background as a rep and visiting stores is kind of how you possibly generated your list. But is that accurate? I mean, how did you Like kind of how
Not
do
a-
you make decisions about who to interview and who to approach first and so on?
It's not just the rep. I've been doing this for 30 years. And so I have colleagues and friends and a lot of people I know have retired. And so I have connections from even borders. And I am pulling on all of those, the people that I've known for many, many years, and then asking them to put me in touch with people I may not know, but I know of. And this is open to any bookseller and former bookseller. So I'm not discerning at all between whoever wants an interview gets one. Because I want a variety of experiences from a variety of backgrounds and a variety of ages. So I've even interviewed a bookseller who was only doing it for 6 months. And that's been great. I mean, a lot of the people I have solicited, but a lot of other booksellers just heard about it and signed up. And I'd never met them before. And so I wish I had more manpower to do more because I think that with more people working on the project, which would be great, we get many more interviews and have this spread quite a bit. So,
Well, if you had a kind of a little flyer or brochure, I mean, when I would go into stores or the people, I know a bookseller too, I would be glad to say, oh, you really should be part of this project. So if you could,
yeah.
if you could post it, I think other people would network with you like that,
Yeah.
Lenore.
I'm terrible at social media. I have a website. I know I was doing social media for a while, but it is so unbelievably time consuming and
Yeah.
almost impossible to keep up with when you have a full-time day job.
Yeah,
So,
I know.
yeah. And so the website is there and it does have all the information on how to sign up. I mean, I use Calendly and have posted times when I'm available for interviews and encourage people to go to the website, click the link and sign up for an interview. And then we meet over Zoom. And then when I am traveling as a rep, I do try to set up in-person interviews. So that's where the repping does help because it's better always to interview in person than it is over Zoom.
I can selfishly make one recommendation for a
Please.
good interview. I'll
You?
put it in
Would
the
you like?
chat.
Yeah.
It's just from my hometown. Actually, there's two people, but yeah, because this gets to the parameters question. Are you only kind of focused? I mean, I guess you said everyone, but what about like the secondhand market, which I know is kind of shrinking in the US?
Yeah, my focus I've interviewed a couple people who have experience in secondhand, but that's such a different it's a different animal, I think, especially antiquarian. And my background, my experience is with this trade independent book selling community. So my focus really is on that. I've asked John Welch. I know him.
Okay, all right, that's where I work. I mean,
I have
that's
to
it.
pin him down, but I did talk to him at Winter Institute.
Good luck.
I
I mean,
Yeah.
I worked ages ago when I was a student. I worked there, and it's some of the happiest memories of my life. The reason I'm mentioning them though, I mean, for like kind of some of the things you were talking, some of the themes you were touching on, is that Talking Leaves opened as a co-op in the 70s, and it was like properly run as one. So like, whatever they call it now. I mean, it is John. I mean, he's getting up there in age. I mean, I don't know how his but his assistant manager Lucy, and I'm blanking on her last name. This is awful. She's also been there forever. So if John's not available, ask for Lucy. Yeah, because the whole history of the shop is kind of fascinating. They've seen a lot and they've done a lot. But yeah, if you can pin him down.
So my other side mission is when I do talk to people like John Welch is to encourage them to donate whatever they have in their basements to a local institution.
Well, I mean, I think in that case, I mean, this is kind of to the theme of this. They were forced to close their main location about 5 or 6 years ago. And they now have a smaller location that I think does well, but I can't, knowing what I know of their storage and overstock, I'm not sure where that went.
Yeah, and that's what's heartbreaking.
And also the record keeping habits were.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, yeah, but I know what you mean. There's a remarkable history there, and I know he's also given interviews before, so there may even, and that would be like another thing I would be wondering if you. I mean, I guess this would require a team and funding, but
Yeah, exactly. I need a
Right,
team to expand this project. Frankly, I need a team and funding, and that is at the moment, difficult for me to work on at the same time because I have actually been promoted, and so I have a new job
Oh
with
no.
a lot more responsibility, and
This is normally where I would congratulate the person.
yeah, and it is gonna take me a while to get back to working on promoting and doing the oral history project.
Oh.
You know what? I mean, I bet state humanities funding bodies would be a really good source for this in the United States. Like, I think because it is really a form of public humanities too, and involving the community. And I think that I think that it would be interesting to try to get an intern from the English department or something, right? Or history department. Get them to come work for you, find like intern, and somebody that wants to go into grant development work, right? And so now they go and look at all the requests for grants.
That's a good idea.
Create a big Excel sheet. So you put Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, what the requirements, and if they could do a template, so people just go in, and yeah, I could see that. I was also going to say two other things real quickly, and I have to leave a little early, and I'm so sorry that I have to do. But I'm thinking when Matt asked about the secondhand thing, I was thinking, and you were talking about that story, I was thinking about a secondhand bookstop that had been here since the early 70s, Idle Times. And then probably about 10 years ago, the owner died of cancer. I knew him. And his wife sold it. They both lived above this way, moved in different locations, but within a 3-block radius. And they sold it to a group of people, but they have made it hybrid. They have added new books to it, which I find interesting. I'm also, of course, thinking of, and I'm sure they have all their recorded shows. So that is something, the book guys that were on NPR that own Second Story Book and DC that is still going. And they no longer have their Book Guys TV show, but they were antiquarian. And so they're, I think that they already have kind of an archive of maybe, I didn't listen to them regularly. I listened to Book TV, but I didn't listen to them. So, but I'm very excited about your project.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
I
Yeah.
can make Century bookseller. That's how I joined. But I have become very interested. I also do post-colonial fiction that I teach and Booker and literary prizes. But I've become very, very interested in, contemporary bookseller research as well because of this group. So I thank Sam and Evan.
Well,
Yes.
I'm happy to, internally, with anybody who feels like their research might benefit from any of these recordings, I'm happy to share them.
Okay.
Just behind the scenes, privately. They've all signed releases for me to do what I'd like to do with them, whatever I'd like to do with them. Just note that it takes a while to process the audio. Sometimes I've actually had to teach myself Adobe Audition so that I can make sure that the audio sounds okay. I have to do some editing, but again, I'm always happy to share with other researchers. So.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to have to go. Okay. Thank
It was
you.
nice to see you. Thank you, Eleanor.
Series.
Eleanor.
Let me see. Leave.
Matt, do you have a question? I know you've got to go soon, so I'll let you go. Ask Lanora if you want to ask it. Oh, we're losing people now.
She disappeared. Okay. There's
I'm here.
There's a group, I think that they're called Story Brand. I know, Sam, you had told me about them, and I've been attending their meetings. The coordinator is a guy named Steve Wax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You must know about those.
It's
Bookstores group.
Do you know about this group?
Mm-mm.
I mean, I'm the odd one at the meetings now because they advertise that they're open to also like researchers and interested parties, but I'm the only non-bookseller joining.
Okay.
And I was kind of like, fly on the wall, kind of listening to whatever the talks were. And they roped me into like, so where are you, Matt? What do you do?
Yeah.
And I had an awkward exchange, but there's about 7 to 10 booksellers that attend these meetings really regularly. And
Okay.
honestly, the main topics of the meetings tend to be about how they can, I don't know, do displays better. It's really practical. Like it's not academic at all, which is kind of what I like about it. They are talking about their businesses and kind of things they're trying out or things that are not successful. And they try to bring in guest speakers as well. Oh yeah, reimagining bookstores. Yeah, it's
Oh yeah, yeah, I know that group. I
yeah, the
know.
group. So and then
Yeah.
the people who run it are very energetic. So yeah, it might be a good way to in terms of like you were talking about like advertising, just a quick way to put the word out.
Yeah, that's a
Well,
good idea. I hadn't thought to contact them about it, but yeah, that's
yeah,
great. Thank you.
and they're all like they all seem very nice. There are no
Mhm.
egos. It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, I know some of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Has there been any pushback at all from any individuals or like is there
On the
anyone?
project?
Yeah.
No, not at all. I'm constantly getting thanked for doing it. I think booksellers get it and they understand what I'm doing, and they've been incredibly supportive. And like I said, it was almost overwhelming because I had so many people want to do interviews. I didn't have time to accommodate all the requests. And so, I have notes on following up with people, like that I'm doing months later to try to say, now I have time for you.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is I think I've met some grumpy British booksellers recently who, I mean, I wasn't asking them directly to interview them, but they like scoffed at the idea that there was anything to say
Yeah,
while they were gossiping with other regular customers, you know.
right, right. Yeah.
So
Like, I'm just gonna hit record, sign
yeah,
this.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I know. Yeah, I mean, they're chatty. I mean, booksellers are chatty people. I
Mhm.
mean, it's been my
Yeah.
experience. But yeah.
And
Um,
I've been also, part of it too is to do a little research for my own, book project. And so some of the veteran booksellers, people who've been doing it a long time, I don't stick to those prompt questions. I will, they will talk about something and I'll try to dig into the history of that more. And so I've been also trying to get their takes on, if they were a bookseller in the 90s, what it was like to be a part of, the ABA's lawsuits for the unfair business practices against Borders and Barnes and Noble and Avon Books, and what that experience was like. What the experience was like when Amazon really was hurting everybody, and even a little bit before that. Like I've talked to the former owners of Room of One's Own about starting a feminist bookstore in the 70s. And so it's all been very interesting to have that generation talk about their experiences. And that's what I mean, that all of them have been very willing. Like I had a great conversation with Chuck Robinson. He used to own Bellingham Books in Washington, and he was the president of the ABA. We talked for 2 hours.
that's good. That's
Yeah,
great.
about his experiences and his opinions about book selling and how it's changed. And so those are also very interesting interviews. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean I started at a Barnes and Noble
Mhm.
in '98. And when I got around to wanting to work at Talking Leaves, I was warned, a friend of mine worked there, and she warned me to not even, she recommended I not put Barnes and Noble on my CV.
Yeah, at that time,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
time because of all of it. And then
Yeah.
and then said not to bring it up. And I didn't have a lot of work experience. It was that in a supermarket. So I'm like, I've got to put it on. I'm kind of like, it's the only thing I have. I was still in college, like undergrad. And sure enough, there was an interview, and sure enough, it came up in the interview, and it was like it was Lucy and John, and they were really clearly it was working against me that I had
Mhm.
but 2 years at Barnes and Noble, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay.
I had a bookseller say who in your situation, they worked at Barnes and Noble and then they applied at an independent bookstore, and then they got the job, and they said, I didn't even learn what book selling was until I worked at an independent book.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That was also very interesting.
I mean, I wouldn't trade in any of those experiences, but yeah, it was, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
totally different animal. That's great. So how are you store? Are you? I mean, because as the project grows, do you have like plans for like storing it? Is it all going to be the website or?
Um, well, yeah, right now, see, the thing is, I didn't get to tell you, Samantha, that the University of Iowa has backed out on me for
Oh
storing the
no.
archive.
Oh shoot.
I'm not exactly clear what happened there, but I think that something got messed up with whatever bureaucracy and politics they have going on there. So now it does not have a home. I am just storing it on a cloud server that I have and hoping to find a new institution partner who will take this collection and, you know, make it available to everybody. But that has to,
So we
I got
really-
kind of back to square one on that.
Yeah.
There's a woman, I mean, I can't guarantee anything. I just know she'd be a friendly face. The curator of special collections at Ohio State, Jolie
That's my alma
Brown.
mater.
Oh, is it? Okay. It's yeah, she's I mean, I don't know much beyond that she would just be, she probably would take the meeting and be very nice. But they have her particular interests are zines, and they have and I think now currently cookbooks. So it's kind of like the collecting parameters are not quite book selling, but they do have, I'm not sure how, again, I don't know how it ended up there, but they do have the Sunwise Turn, some of
Yeah,
the
I went there to
Turn
look at it.
records.
Some of
Yeah,
it,
so
yeah.
and
Yeah.
she's kind of she does attend, she's attended Bookselling Research Network meetings in the past. I think she was at my talk. And I think she'd be open-minded, and she might just be a good person to talk to about ideas for other places. Like
Yeah, that would be,
she's a
if you want-
friendly face. That's about what I can.
Because I would like to, I don't have much experience or connections in the library world or, you know, the academic library world, but in my head, and my vision is that one of these institutions that has a great history of the book collection
Right.
wants to do a history of book selling collection or history of bookstores collection, so that, you know, it'll be a slightly different collection. And I would love to get, you know, bookstores from all over the country to donate whatever they have to that one institution. And so
Hang on,
you
let
would
me just
have
stop the recording a second.